I bought a cabin for 25 cents. People laughed at me, said it was junk, a waste of time. But 1 year later, that same cabin was worth $10 million. That's when the HOA showed up claiming it was their property. And let me tell you, they messed with the wrong person. Before we dive deeper into the story, please take a second to subscribe. It takes a lot of work to bring real stories like this to life for you. When I first saw the listing, I thought it was a prank. Abandoned mountain cabin starting bid, 25 cents. It was buried deep in the county auction listings, just another forgotten property on a spreadsheet of unpaid taxes. But something about it caught my eye. Maybe it was the coordinates, nestled near Pine Lake, a quiet, untouched stretch of wilderness. Or maybe it was the idea of owning something real, even if it was just an old shack. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, working long hours at an auto shop. Rent was eating me alive. So yeah, when I saw that quarter-priced cabin, I couldn't resist. The auction was held in a stuffy county office basement. About 15 people were there, most of them real estate flippers and lawyers. When the auctioneer read the cabin's description, no one raised a hand. Nobody wanted to bother with a collapsed roof and a property that had been abandoned for decades. Starting bid, 25 cents, the auctioneer said with a bored tone. Silence. Then I raised my hand. The man blinked at me, half amused. Going once, going twice, bang, sold for 25 cents. And just like that, I owned land. I drove up that weekend to see it. It took nearly 3 hours from the nearest gas station. The road turned from gravel to dirt and then finally to a thin, rutted trail. My old truck bounced and rattled as trees closed in around me. When I finally reached the cabin, my heart sank a little. It was rough. The roof sagged like a hammock. The porch was half gone. The front door was hanging by one hinge, and I could smell damp wood from the driveway. But despite all that, it had soul. It overlooked a glittering lake surrounded by pines. The air was cold, clean, and quiet. And even through the rot and decay, I could picture it. New paint, a steady roof, smoke curling from a chimney. I stood there for a long moment, imagining what it could be. Then I smiled. All right, I said out loud, let's bring you back to life. The work begins. The next few months were chaos. Every weekend, I'd drive up with a cooler, tools, and cheap lumber from the clearance rack. I tore off the old shingles by hand. I patched the roof with tar paper and plywood. I slept on an air mattress, cooked beans on a camp stove, and showered with a garden sprayer rigged to a tree. Neighbors? None. Just the sound of the wind and the lake. And honestly, it was the happiest I'd ever been. Sometimes I'd sit on the half-rebuilt porch at sunset, watching golden light spill across the lake. I started filming little clips on my phone, before and after shots, just for fun. I found old newspapers in the attic from 1968, a rusted rifle under a floorboard, even a faded photo of a man and woman standing by the same porch, smiling proudly. The back of the photo said, "Our forever home." It hit me that someone had once loved this place, too. The breakthrough: by late spring, I'd replaced the entire foundation, resealed the walls, and added solar panels. One night, a stranger stopped by, a hiker named Jake who'd seen the lights. "Man, you fixed this place up good," he said, whistling. "You know they're building a resort up the mountain next year?" I froze. "A resort?" "Yeah, big ski development. They're buying everything near the lake." That was the first moment I realized this broken-down cabin might be sitting on gold. From 25 cents to millions within 6 months, construction crews started showing up down the road, heavy equipment, surveyors. Investors. I watched the wilderness slowly turn into luxury cabins and paved roads, and with it, property values exploded. A real estate agent came by one morning, all smiles. "Are you the owner here?" "Yep." "Well, you're sitting on prime land now. I've got investors offering up to $3 million for lakefront lots." I nearly dropped the hammer in my hand. $3 million, she nodded. "Could go higher once the resort opens." I laughed out loud. "You're kidding me. I bought this place for a quarter." She looked stunned. "Then you might be the smartest man in the county." I didn't sell right away. I wanted to enjoy it a bit, to finally have something of my own after years of scraping by. I finished the renovation, painted it soft gray, built a new dock, even added a small sign over the door that said, "Lucky Quarter Cabin." For a while, life was perfect. Until one morning when I found a white envelope nailed to my porch. It had the words High Pines Property Association printed across the top. I frowned and opened it. "Dear resident, your property is now under the jurisdiction of the High Pines HOA. Please remit $7,200 in annual dues and schedule your property inspection within 14 days. I blinked, reading it twice. HOA? Here. There wasn't another house within half a mile. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But the tone was threatening. Failure to comply may result in fines or property forfeiture. Forfeiture. That word stuck in my chest like ice. I crumpled the letter and tossed it aside. There was no HOA, this was wilderness land. I'd checked the county maps myself when I bought it, but something told me this wasn't just a mistake. That afternoon, I called the number on the letter. A woman answered, syrupy and smug. High Pines Association, this is Karen speaking. How may I assist you? Hi, Karen, I said cautiously. I just got a letter saying I owe HOA dues. I think there's been a mistake. My property isn't part of any HOA. She gave a little fake laugh. Oh, sir, every property within the High Pines development zone is under our care. You'll need to register as a new homeowner. There isn't a development zone here. This is old county land. I bought it at auction. Karen's voice hardened. Sir, our records say otherwise. You fail to comply, you'll face enforcement penalties. I froze. What kind of penalties? Property lien, forfeiture, or repossession, she said sweetly. You'll receive official notice soon. Then click, the line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone. Something told me my quiet life in the mountains was about to turn into a war. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the wind creaked through the trees outside, I'd jolt awake, half expecting to see someone at the door. It sounds paranoid, right? Something about that call with Karen stuck with me. Her tone wasn't just smug, it was threatening, like she knew something I didn't. The next morning, I walked down the dirt trail to where the new developments had started. Sure enough, I found a giant wooden sign that hadn't been there before. Welcome to High Pines Lake Community, a proud HOA neighborhood. It looked expensive. Fresh paint, marble base, decorative shrubs, all of it right at the entrance of what used to be open forest. Except, here's the thing, my cabin wasn't even in that community. The nearest house was almost a quarter-mile away, but the sign gave me a chill. Were they trying to claim the entire lake now? When I got back home, a silver SUV was parked in my driveway. A woman in a business suit stood outside, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. Can I help you? I asked, walking up cautiously. She didn't even smile. Property inspection, she said flatly. High Pines Association. I blinked. No, you can't just walk onto my property like that. I didn't schedule anything. She scribbled something on her clipboard. Failure to cooperate may result in penalties. You'll be fined for obstruction. Fined, I said, raising my voice. This isn't your land. She tilted her sunglasses down, looking at me like I was an idiot. Sir, everything within the new HOA boundary is subject to oversight. That word again, boundary. Show me where it says that, I demanded. She flipped through her clipboard, then handed me a printed map. It showed a thick red outline around the new resort area, and guess what? My cabin was right in the middle. I shook my head in disbelief. This map isn't official. You just drew this line yourself, she smiled faintly. That line's been approved by our board. Yeah, I snapped. And who approved your board? She didn't answer, just got back into her SUV and drove off, leaving a small dust cloud behind. I stood there for a long moment, staring at that ridiculous map. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some misunderstanding. They were trying to take my property on purpose. And it was working too. If they could intimidate me into paying dues or signing some fake compliance papers, they'd have grounds to say ID agreed to be part of their HOA. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I drove straight to the county office the next morning. The clerk recognized me from when I bought the cabin. Oh, hey, quarter man, he said with a grin. That little cabin's still standing, I nodded. Barely, but now I've got an HOA saying they own it. His smile faded. An HOA? That's not possible. You bought that lot before any development approvals went through. He pulled up my deed on his screen. See, it's marked as unincorporated county land, no HOA jurisdiction whatsoever. Then why are they acting like they do? I asked. He frowned, clicking around. Interesting. They did submit a boundary expansion request last quarter, but it's still pending. It hasn't been approved yet. So there it was. They were bluffing, pretending the boundary was official when it was. I left the office furious but determined. I had proof. That weekend, I went back to my cabin and found another letter nailed to my door. This one was more aggressive. Final notice. You are in violation of HOA Bylaw 2.3, noncompliance with inspection requirements. You have 7 days to pay $7,200 or face property forfeiture proceedings. And under it, taped to the wood, was a bright orange notice of violation. They'd literally trespassed again to post fake legal papers. I ripped it down and crumpled it in my fist. That's it, I muttered. You want a fight? You got one. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, dates, times, every letter, every voicemail. The next time the inspector came, I was ready. I stepped onto the porch with my phone recording. You're trespassing, I said firmly. This is private land, not under HOA jurisdiction. She hesitated, realizing she was being filmed. You'll regret this, she muttered. Our lawyers don't lose, I smiled. Neither do the truth and county records. That video ended up being the first thing that went viral online later, but at the time, I just posted it to a small Facebook group for local property owners. Within hours, people started commenting. They tried that on my uncle's land too. High Pines is notorious for boundary scams. It was bigger than I thought. A few days later, I got an email from the HOA's legal department. You are hereby ordered to cease all online defamation against High Pines Association. Continued harassment will result in civil litigation. They were threatening to sue me for telling the truth. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the calm lake, wondering how far they'd go. Would they really take me to court over this? Could an HOA just make up a boundary and claim land? I picked up my phone and started recording again. "All right," I said into the camera, "so apparently I'm being threatened by an HOA that doesn't legally exist on my land. If anyone watching this has dealt with something similar, drop a comment below, because this is insane. And honestly, I want to ask you the same thing. What would you do if someone just showed up and claimed your home out of nowhere? Would you fight back or just pay them to make it stop?" The next morning, I found tire tracks all over my driveway, fresh ones. I followed them down to my mailbox, and that's when I saw it. Someone had spray-painted a big red X on my cabin's front gate. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was intimidation. I called the sheriff's department, filed a report, and gave them everything: the letters, the map, the threats. The deputy, a tall guy named Reynolds, listened quietly. He finally said, "You're not the first person they've tried to push. They're powerful, but they're sloppy. Keep your evidence. If they step foot on your property again, call me directly." That gave me a little peace of mind, but also made me realize something. This was about to get a lot bigger than a few letters. I started contacting local journalists, sending them copies of the fake maps and HOA threats. A few never replied, but one investigative reporter did. Her name was Emily Torres, and when she saw the documents, her first words were, "Oh, this is going to be fun." She promised to dig deeper. And boy, did she. Within a week, she discovered that the HOA's so-called approval for expansion had been rejected twice by the county. Yet they'd forged signatures and continued claiming the area anyway. Fraud, straight up. And the cherry on top, the HOA president, Karen herself, had recently bought a private lot bordering mine. If she could force me out, she'd own the entire lakefront strip. That's when everything clicked. This wasn't just power, it was greed. I looked out at the water that night, the moon reflecting off the calm surface. This place had been my dream, something I built from nothing with my own hands. And now some fake HOA president thought she could just steal it. Not a chance. I made up my mind right then. I was going to expose her, not just to the county, but to the entire world. If this happened to you, if someone tried to fake ownership of your home, how far would you go to fight back? Would you call the cops or go public like I did? Let me know in the comments below. Speech balloon, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this story turns into the biggest HOA takedown this town's ever seen. Because in part 3, things get ugly. The next morning, I woke up to shouting outside. At first, I thought maybe it was hikers or construction workers from the new resort. But when I stepped onto the porch, my heart nearly stopped. 3 pickup trucks were parked in my driveway, all with High Pines HOA logos plastered on the doors. And standing right in front of my cabin was Karen. She looked exactly how you'd imagine a power-drunk HOA president: tall, blonde bob, sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a weapon, and a permanent frown etched on her face. "Good morning," she called in a voice that dripped with fake politeness. "We're here for your compliance inspection." I crossed my arms. "You're trespassing, Karen. I told your office to stop sending people here." She smiled tightly. "You'll find that you don't decide that anymore." She motioned to 2 men behind her. "Gentlemen, take pictures of the structure and lot lines." They started walking toward my porch with cameras. I stepped down, blocking their path. "You take one more step and I'll call the sheriff." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Sheriff Reynolds? Oh, I already spoke to him. He understands this is just a property dispute. No need to escalate." That was a lie. I could see it in her eyes. "You think because you've got fancy paper and a logo you can scare people?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. Karen smirked. "Scare you? No, I'm simply enforcing the rules. You're illegally occupying HOA land. The sooner you accept that, the smoother this will go." That's when I snapped. "You forged county documents, Karen. You're the one breaking the law." She froze just for a split second. Then her smile came back. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said sweetly. "But I do know you'll be hearing from our attorneys very soon." She turned sharply and walked back to her SUV, her little army following behind. Before she got in, she looked over her shoulder and said, "Enjoy your lake view while you can. It won't be yours much longer." I stood there in silence as their engines rumbled away. For the first time, I actually felt scared, not angry, just scared. These people had money, lawyers, and political connections. I was just one guy with an old cabin, but I wasn't giving up. Not yet. That night, I drove to the county record's office again and met with Emily Torres, the reporter investigating the HOA. She had stacks of files spread out across a conference table, maps, zoning letters, even email chains she'd obtained through public records requests. "You were right," she said. "They submitted 3 different versions of their expansion plan. One was approved for the South Ridge area, but the one including your cabin, completely rejected." I leaned closer. "Then how are they getting away with this?" Emily sighed. They're using the approved version's number on all their documents, so it looks legitimate to anyone who doesn't read the fine print. It's brilliant, but it's also fraud. Can we prove it? She smiled. We can if we get the county to talk on record. The next day, we met with Commissioner Davis, the same official who'd signed the original rejection. He looked furious when Emily showed him the HOA's forged boundary map. They used my signature on this, he barked. That's a felony. He called his assistant immediately. Get me the county attorney, we're opening an investigation today. That's when it finally felt like the tide was turning. Emily turned to me and grinned. You might have just started something. Big quarter man. But of course, Karen wasn't about to back down quietly. 3 days later, a lawsuit showed up at my door, filed by High Pines Association, accusing me of defamation, harassment, and illegal occupancy. They claimed I was spreading false information about them online and damaging their reputation. When I showed the papers to Emily, she laughed. This is classic intimidation, SLAPP lawsuit, designed to scare you into silence. It didn't work. Instead, Emily published her first article. Local HOA accused of forging county documents to seize private land. The story exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in. This guy deserves a medal. My HOA pulled the same stunt. Karen's going to jail, I hope. Even local news stations picked it up. The sheriff's department was suddenly getting calls from all over the county demanding an investigation. Karen must have been fuming. A few nights later, I heard tires again outside. Not the slow crunch of visitors, but fast, aggressive, tearing up gravel. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. Someone had dumped a pile of garbage bags and broken furniture right in front of my cabin gate. Spray painted across one bag in red letters were the words, "Get out." I recorded everything, took pictures, called Sheriff Reynolds. He came out that night with 2 deputies, looked at the mess, and shook his head. Pretty bold move, he said. We'll pull the camera footage from the highway. My guess, HOA security or someone hired by them. Can they get away with this? I asked. He smiled faintly. Not for long. County attorney's already building a case. You just keep your doors locked and your cameras rolling. And just when I thought things couldn't get crazier, they did. 2 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of chainsaws. I ran outside and nearly screamed. Karen's crew was cutting down trees on my property. What the hell are you doing? I shouted. One of them turned and yelled over the noise, "Easement clearing, HOA orders." I sprinted toward them. You're on private land. Turn those off before I call the police. Karen appeared again, standing by her SUV with that same smug smile. Relax, she said calmly. We're just maintaining community property lines. This isn't community property, I yelled. You're trespassing, but she didn't flinch. Prove it, she said coldly. At that moment, I did the only thing I could. I started recording everything on my phone. Karen's face, the chainsaws, the trucks, the whole scene. Sheriff Reynolds showed up within 20 minutes, lights flashing. He walked straight up to Karen. Ma'am, step away from the property. This is HOA business, she said, crossing her arms. No, he replied firmly. This is criminal trespassing and destruction of private property. Karen's confidence cracked for the first time. You can't arrest me, I'm the HOA president. Then you should have known the law better, he said. The deputies made her crew shut down the saws and escorted them off the land. Karen was red-faced, shaking with fury. As she passed me, she hissed, You think this is over? You're done when my lawyers are through with you. I just smiled. You're done when the county is. That night, I sat by the fire pit outside the cabin, watching the embers glow. The sound of the chainsaws still echoed in my ears. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The county, the sheriff, the press, they were all on my side now. Still, something told me Karen wasn't finished. People like her never stop until they're forced to. So I started preparing legally, emotionally, mentally for whatever came next. Because this wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about standing up to the kind of people who think power gives them ownership over others. And if she wanted a war, she just found one. What would you do if someone like Karen tried to destroy your home just to feed her greed? Would you go public like I did, or keep quiet to avoid trouble? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because in part 4, Karen's lies finally start to crumble, and it all comes crashing down in court. The morning after the chainsaw incident, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, notifications, emails, my story had gone everywhere. Emily's second article hit the front page of 3 local news sites. HOA president caught trespassing on homeowner's land amid fraud investigation. There was even a picture, Karen red-faced, shouting while sheriff deputies stood in the background. The comments section exploded. Lock her up. She messed with the wrong guy. Finally, someone exposing these HOA bullies. By noon, my phone rang again. It was Commissioner Davis. We've opened a formal investigation, he said. And the county attorney wants to meet with you. Today. The county meeting when I arrived, Davis, Emily, and the county attorney, a tough-looking woman named Lisa Crane, were waiting in the conference room. They had a thick folder sitting in front of them, stamped High Pines HOA. Lisa got straight to the point. We've confirmed they forged 2 county documents, she said, and illegally extended their zoning map. That's wire fraud, document falsification, and abuse of jurisdiction. I sat down slowly, trying to process it. So what happens now? Lisa glanced at Davis, then said, We're freezing all HOA operations until we complete the audit, but we need you to testify and be prepared for retaliation. I nodded. They've already been retaliating. Emily added quietly, They vandalized his gate, dumped trash, and tried to cut his trees. I've got the footage. Lisa leaned back. Good, keep everything. This is exactly the kind of evidence that buries people like her. That night I went home and sat on the porch, watching the lake reflect the fading sunset. It was calm, too calm. Then headlights appeared on the road again. I sighed, half expecting another harassment attempt. But when the car stopped, Sheriff Reynolds stepped out. Even in, quarter man, he said with a small grin. You've been busy, I chuckled. You saw the news. Everyone's seen the news. Karen's famous now, not the way she wanted. He leaned against the rail, lowering his voice. Just so you know, she filed a harassment complaint against you today. Claims you're stalking and defaming her. I laughed out loud. You're kidding. Wish I was. Don't worry, though. DA's office already tossed it. But she's desperate. People like that don't crumble quietly. Karen's desperation, he was right. 2 days later, I got a thick letter in the mail, another lawsuit. This one demanded $500,000 for emotional distress and loss of community reputation. I took one look at it and called Lisa Crane. She chuckled. Oh, she's panicking. Let her dig her own grave. The more she files, the worse she looks. And she was right again, because the following morning the county froze all HOA bank accounts pending fraud investigation. Karen's community empire was collapsing in real time, but she wasn't done yet. I got another email, anonymous this time. You don't know who you're dealing with. You'll regret crossing her. Drop it now. I stared at it for a long moment. No name, no address, just intimidation. But honestly, it just made me angrier, so I forwarded it to Emily. Within an hour, she replied, This is big. It came from the HOA office IP address. She's emailing threats from her own building. Unbelievable. The news stormed. By the end of that week, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Talk shows, podcasts, local news channels. Everyone wanted the 25-cent cabin guy. And the more people learned, the more Karen's reputation crumbled. Former HOA members started coming forward, saying she'd fined residents thousands for unauthorized bird feeders and improper mailbox paint. She'd even repossessed one man's jet ski because it didn't fit the community aesthetic. Emily aired a segment featuring interviews with those residents. It ended with my video of Karen trespassing and yelling on my land. The clip blew up. Millions of views. And then the final straw. The county's audit uncovered missing HOA funds, tens of thousands unaccounted for. When the investigators asked for receipts, Karen couldn't produce a single one. The confrontation that weekend, I stopped by the local diner for breakfast. I just wanted a quiet morning. But as I sat down, someone approached from behind me. Karen. She looked exhausted, pale, eyes sunken, hair disheveled. Not the powerful HOA queen I'd seen before. You think you've won. She hissed, gripping my table. You ruined my life, my name, my business. You've made me a villain. I set down my coffee slowly. You did that yourself. Her voice cracked. You don't get it. I built that community. I kept it beautiful, organized. And you stole from people, I interrupted. You terrorized homeowners. You tried to steal my home. She stared at me for a long moment, trembling. Then she whispered, You'll see what real power looks like. Before I could respond, she turned and stormed out of the diner. Everyone was watching. Some even clapped. The breaking point that night, Sheriff Reynolds called again. Just a heads up, he said. Karen's HOA just had their office raided. County found boxes of fake documents and financial records. She's been taken in for questioning. I exhaled deeply, leaning back against the porch railing. It's finally happening, he chuckled. Yeah. And you might want to get that cabin of yours insured for more, quarter man. Once this goes public, that property value's gonna skyrocket even higher. I laughed softly. From 25 cents to 10 million and a felony investigation in between. Reflection that night, the lake was quiet. The sky was filled with stars, the kind of clear night you only get when you're far from city lights. I sat there thinking about how insane the past year had been. All this over a forgotten cabin I bought for $25, but it wasn't really about money anymore. It was about standing up. about not letting greed and corruption bulldoze over people who can't fight back, and I knew it wasn't over yet. Karen might be cornered, but people like her always have one last trick. The county still had to press charges. The court still had to decide. But for now, I could breathe again. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stop now that she's exposed, or push until she's behind bars? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone. And make sure to subscribe, because in Part 5, the courtroom battle begins, and Karen tries to pull one last dirty trick to save herself. I'll never forget the sound of the courtroom doors closing behind me. That heavy thud, final, echoing like the start of something you can't undo. It had been 3 months since Karen's arrest, and the county's case against her was massive. Dozens of charges: fraud, falsification, trespassing, harassment, and misuse of HOA funds. And I was the star witness. The 25-cent cabin guy who started it all. The courtroom tension. When I took my seat, I looked across the room, and there she was. Karen. Gone was the polished suburban queen in her pearls and floral dresses. Now she wore a plain gray suit, her hair flat, her face pale and angry. She didn't look like she ran an empire anymore. She looked like she was trying to survive one. Her lawyer, a slick guy in a navy suit, leaned over and whispered something. Karen didn't even blink. She just stared at me, cold, unblinking, burning with silent fury. Lisa Crane, the county attorney, leaned toward me and whispered, "Remember, just tell the truth. The facts are on your side." I nodded. They always were. The judge entered and the courtroom rose. I felt my pulse in my throat. Cameras lined the back wall, Emily's crew among them. When the trial began, Lisa stood up first. "Your Honor, the people will prove that the defendant, Karen Wilcox, abused her position as HOA president to commit fraud, harassment, and theft under the guise of community management." Her voice was steady, powerful. She pointed right at Karen's table. She targeted one man, the owner of a legally purchased property, to take by deception what she could not have by law. Every word hit like a hammer. I watched Karen's jaw tight. Karen's defense, then her attorney rose. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "this is not a story of greed. This is a misunderstanding, a paperwork issue that spiraled out of control. My client acted to protect her community." "Protect?" I almost laughed out loud. He pointed at me. "The plaintiff, Mr. Walker, has exaggerated events for publicity. He profited off her humiliation." A low murmur rippled through the room. Lisa calmly stood. "Your Honor, the only profit Mr. Walker gained was justice and a roof over his head that Ms. Wilcox tried to steal." The judge nodded slightly. "Proceed." The evidence unfolds. Lisa began with the documents, the fake HOA maps, the forged county seals, each one projected on the screen for the courtroom to see. The audience gasped as she showed how Karen's signature appeared after the official stamp dates. "Forgery," Lisa said simply. "Repeated, intentional, documented." Then came the photo, the ones from the night Karen trespassed with her chainsaw. The lights dimmed and my video played on the monitor, Karen screaming, deputies holding her back, the sound of metal grinding as she tried to tear down my gate. The courtroom fell silent. Karen shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around. Her lawyer whispered, "Objection." The judge cut him off. "Overruled." Lisa turned to the jury. "This is not community protection, this is obsession." My turn to speak. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, swore in, and sat down. Lisa smiled reassuringly. "Mr. Walker, tell the court how this began." I took a deep breath. "It started with a quarter," I said softly. "I bought a forgotten cabin for 25 cents. It was supposed to be a peaceful project. But instead, it turned into a war with someone who thought they owned the world around them. I told them everything: the letters, the threats, the fines, the intimidation, the late-night trespassing, the emails, the forged papers, the fear that I might lose my home to someone's ego. When I finished, you could have heard a pin drop." Lisa nodded. "Thank you." Then Karen's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Walker," he said, pacing slowly, "you claim you bought this cabin for 25 cents. Isn't it true you exploited a county error?" "No," I replied. "I followed the legal process. But surely you knew the land was valuable." "Of course, but value doesn't justify theft," he smirked. "You seem very calm about all this, enjoying your fame." That made me laugh. "If you think getting threatened, stalked, and harassed is fame, you can have it." Even the judge cracked a faint smile. The twist when the defense called Karen to the stand, I felt the tension rise. She stood adjusting her jacket and walked up like she still ran the HOA meeting. Her tone was sweet, fake sweet. "Your Honor, I only wanted what was fair for the community. That cabin, it was never supposed to be sold. It was public land." Lisa jumped up. "That's false. The deed clearly states." Karen cut her off. "You don't understand. I built that neighborhood. I made it perfect. People respected me." Her voice cracked, rising into hysteria. The judge banged his gavel. "Ms. Wilcox, control yourself." But she didn't stop. "He ruined everything. That land was mine, all of it mine." The jury's faces said it all. That wasn't the voice of a community protector. That was someone unraveling. Lisa calmly said, "No further questions." Verdict pending. When court adjourned for the day, I stepped outside into the cool air. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved in my face. "Do you think she'll be convicted? What's next for you?" I just smiled. I trust the truth. That night I sat back on my porch again, that same spot overlooking the water. The same stars, the same peace. But it felt different now. The war was almost over. What do you think? Should Karen go to jail for what she did, or just pay a massive fine and lose her position? Drop your thoughts down below. I really want to hear your take. And hit that subscribe button, because in part 6 the verdict drops and Karen tries one last shocking move before sentencing that no one saw coming. The next morning the courthouse steps looked like a movie set. News vans lined the street. Reporters waited shoulder to shoulder, cameras flashing. The whole town wanted to see how the HOA queen would fall. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Karen sat at the defense table, fidgeting with a stack of papers that weren't even hers. Her lawyer whispered something, but she just stared blankly ahead, eyes cold, distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. I took my seat in the gallery, hands clasped. Lisa Crane, calm as ever, organized her notes with surgical precision. The bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Mathers." Everyone stood. The judge took his seat, flipped through the file, and cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence, the testimonies, and financial records presented by the state of Oregon, he paused, eyes flicking between Karen and her attorney. "This court finds the defendant, Karen Wilcox, guilty on multiple counts of fraud, falsification of public records, harassment, and criminal trespass." Gasps filled the room. I exhaled slowly, shakily. It was over. But then something strange happened. Karen's silence, she didn't react, not even a blink. The judge continued, "Sentencing will take place in 30 days. The defendant is hereby remanded to custody pending." Suddenly, Karen stood up. "No," she said quietly, "you can't do this." The bailiff stepped forward. "Ma'am, please sit." "No." Her voice echoed off the walls, sharp, desperate. "I made this community. I gave them rules, beauty, order. Without me, they're nothing." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge banged his gavel. "Mrs. Wilcox, sit down immediately or you'll be held in contempt." But she didn't sit. She turned and locked eyes with me. "You think you won, don't you?" she hissed. "You think you took everything from me, but you haven't seen what's coming." Before anyone could react, she grabbed something from her bag, a stack of papers, and threw them across the courtroom. They fluttered through the air like snow, scattering over the jurors and floor. Lisa's jaw dropped. "What the?" The papers were quitclaim deeds. All of them. Dozens of fake property transfers she'd been trying to sign over land before the trial even ended. The desperate move security rushed in, restraining her as she screamed. "You can't take it from me. It's mine, all mine." The bailiff hauled her back as the judge shouted, "Remove the defendant from my courtroom." The audience sat frozen, stunned. I thought I'd seen every trick in her playbook, but this was her final act of madness. Lisa turned to me. "She tried to transfer every property back into her name, even yours." I blinked, trying to process. "While on trial." "Yep." That's desperation at its peak. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. Headlines screamed, "HOA president has meltdown in courtroom. Karen Wilcox tries to forge land transfers during fraud trial." The video went viral in hours. The aftermath: later that evening, I got a call from Sheriff Reynolds. "Well, you did it, quarter man," he said with a tired chuckle. "The county's officially seizing all HOA property. Turns out she even had an offshore account." I laughed softly. "Of course she did. You'll want to check your mail soon," he added. "The county attorney is sending you something." When the letter arrived, I almost couldn't believe it. It was an official restitution notice. The county was ordering Karen to pay back nearly $600,000 in damages and legal costs, including part of mine. I sat back in my chair, staring at the paper. From 25 cents to 10 million, and justice on top of it. It didn't feel real. The visit a week later, I went to check on the cabin, the one that started all this. The air was crisp, the pine trees swayed gently, the water shimmered like glass, and for the first time in a long time it was quiet. But as I walked up the path, I noticed a car parked near the gate, a beat-up sedan. A woman sat inside. When I got closer, I froze. It was Martha, Corinne's former assistant, the one who'd handled all the HOA paperwork. She stepped out nervously, clutching an envelope. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, I needed to tell you something. I nodded cautiously. "Go ahead." "Corinne, she wasn't working alone." My stomach dropped. "What?" "There's someone higher, a man named Carlton Reed, County Planning Department. He helped her falsify those maps, took bribes to look the other way." I stood there in silence, wind rustling the trees. It suddenly made sense how she got away with it for so long, how the documents passed inspection. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. She looked down. "Because she's gone. She told me before the arrest if anything happened to her, he'd come after anyone who talked." The shadow above that night, I couldn't sleep. Was it true? Was there someone else behind it all, someone inside the system? I sat on the porch again, watching the ripples on the lake. The stars reflected back at me, but something felt off, like the story wasn't finished. I looked at the cabin. A property worth $10 million now. But behind it may be something darker still hiding in the paperwork. And I thought to myself, what if Corinne was just the face, not the mastermind? So what do you think? Was Corinne acting alone, or was there someone bigger pulling the strings from behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading all your theories. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because in Part 7, I dig deeper into the corruption behind the county offices. And find out that Corinne's power wasn't the only one I was fighting. For weeks after the verdict, I tried to move on. The cabin was peaceful again. The air smelled like pine and rain instead of paperwork and stress. But even in the quiet, something gnawed at me. Martha's words. She wasn't working alone. The name Carlton Reed stuck in my head like a splinter I couldn't pull out. He was a senior official in the county planning department, the same office that approved property boundaries, issued permits, and handled zoning disputes. The same department that accidentally approved Corinne's forged maps. Coincidence? No way, so I did what I do best. I started digging. The search for Carlton I began with public records, late nights, endless coffee, and the county database. Carlton's name appeared on hundreds of HOA filings across multiple neighborhoods. And every single one of those HOAs had one thing in common: Wilcox Property Management. My pulse picked up. Corinne had her fingers in at least 5 different associations, and all of them had zoning changes rubber-stamped by Carlton Reed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a system. He approved the fake maps. She collected the fines and fees. Together, they turned community rules into a money-printing machine. A dangerous connection. I called Emily, the reporter who'd covered everything from the start. She answered on the first ring. "Walker, don't tell me you're starting another fire." I laughed nervously. "Depends how you define fire. You ever heard of Carlton Reed?" There was a pause. "Oh, him, yeah, he's slippery. People have tried to expose him before. Never sticks. Every time someone digs too deep, the story dies." "Dies?" I asked. "Yep, files disappear. Whistleblowers quit." "You sure you want to poke that bear?" I looked out at the lake, remembering the night Corinne screamed that I didn't know who I was dealing with. Maybe now I finally did. "I don't poke bears," I said quietly. "I bring them into the light." Emily set up a meeting through a mutual contact at the courthouse. We arranged to bump into Carlton at a public zoning forum downtown. When he walked in, I instantly understood why no one challenged him. Tall, smooth voice, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked born to talk his way through walls. He smiled as he noticed me. "Ah, the infamous quarter man," he said. "Quite the celebrity lately." I kept my tone calm. "Depends on who you ask. Some people call me Trouble." He laughed softly. "Trouble's relative. You stirred up a lot of noise. Corinne was difficult but effective. She made people behave." "By stealing from them?" I said sharply. His smile faded just a little. "Let's not pretend you understand the complexities of community management, Mr. Walker. You profited from her fall. Don't act like you didn't enjoy it." That made my blood boil. "I didn't enjoy anything. I just wanted peace. She tried to take my home." Carlton stepped closer, voice low. "And yet you're still here, still digging. Be careful where you dig. Not every hole is meant to be opened." He smiled again, that polite corporate smile that hides venom, and walked away. The threat that night, I came home to find something taped to my cabin door. A single piece of paper, no words, just a photo me standing outside the courthouse taken from across the street. And beneath it, drawn in black marker, "Drop it." My stomach twisted. I called Sheriff Reynolds immediately. He showed up 20 minutes later, flashlight in hand, jaw tight. "That's not HOA-level stuff anymore," he said. "You're stirring state-level trouble now." I sighed. "So would I just stop asking questions?" He looked at the note again. "No, you just don't do it alone." The discovery, Emily and I went full throttle. She pulled favors, tapped contacts, and within a week we had access to a leaked county financial report. Buried deep inside it was a list of consulting expenses. Payments to shell companies tied to Corinne Wilcox and Carlton Reed. Over $1.2 million funneled through fake property consulting firms. That was the proof we needed. But before Emily could publish it, her laptop was stolen straight out of her newsroom office. When she called me, her voice was shaking. "Walker, they broke in, they took the drives." I froze. "Do you still have backups?" "One hidden at home, but if they found my office, it's only a matter of time." That night, I stayed awake with the lights off, listening to every sound outside the cabin. Crickets, the lake, a branch snapping. Every shadow felt like it was watching. The breaking point the next morning, I drove to Emily's place to help her secure her files. But as I pulled up, I noticed a black SUV parked 2 houses down. Tinted windows, engine idling. I parked slowly, pretending not to notice. Emily rushed outside, clutching her laptop bag. "We need to get this to the sheriff now," she whispered. We barely made it to my truck before the SUV roared to life. "Go!" she yelled. I hit the gas. Tires screeched as we sped down the rural road. The SUV followed close, aggressive. "Do they know we have it?" I shouted. "They know," she said. "They want the evidence gone." The escape, we swerved off onto a dirt road leading toward the lake, the SUV's headlights slicing through the trees behind us. I could feel my heart slamming against my ribs. Finally, we reached the cabin. I jumped out, ran to the porch, and yanked open the hidden panel under the floorboards. "Put the drive here," I said. Emily slid it inside just as the SUV's engine roared up the hill. I grabbed my phone and hit speed dial. "Reynolds, it's happening again?" Within minutes, sirens echoed down the road. The SUV reversed, fishtailed, and vanished into the forest. Reynolds' cruiser pulled up seconds later. He stepped out, eyes scanning the tree line. "Guess we know your bear doesn't like daylight," he muttered. A storm coming that night after the police left, I sat on the porch again, soaked in adrenaline, exhaustion, and disbelief. This was no longer about a greedy HOA or a power-hungry woman. This was corruption buried deep in the county itself. And now I was a target again. The lake was still, the stars bright, but somewhere in the woods I could swear I heard an engine idling far away, just waiting. What would you do if you uncovered proof of corruption in your own county? Keep fighting or walk away while you still could? Drop your answer in the comments below. I really want to hear what you do. And don't forget to subscribe, because in Part 8 the fight goes federal. The FBI steps in, the real puppet master is exposed, and someone close to me betrays everything. When Martha told me that Karen hadn't acted alone, I thought she was exaggerating. But a week later, I got proof. A brown envelope arrived in my mailbox, no return address. Inside were photocopies of county property records, each stamped with the same name in the approved by section, Carlton Reed, County Planning Supervisor. It was him. The same man Martha had warned me about. I'd seen his name before, buried deep in the HOA's paperwork. He'd been signing off on Karen's adjusted maps for years, quietly expanding her reach, one falsified survey at a time. And it all led straight to my cabin's land. I went straight to Lisa. She flipped through the papers, brow furrowed. "This isn't just corruption," she muttered. "This is racketeering. They were flipping land through dummy HOAs to hide profits." "Can we nail him?" I asked. "If we can prove he took money, absolutely, but we'll need more than copies." So that night we decided to dig deeper. The late-night discovery, we went to the county records office after hours. Lisa had a friend in it who owed her a favor. Under the faint hum of fluorescent lights, we found Reed's digital logs, and there it was, dozens of off-the-record file accesses tied to Karen's properties. One entry stood out: Parcel 121B, cabin area, transfer pending. Dated 2 days after Karen's arrest. He was still trying to take my land. "He's bold," Lisa said. "Or stupid." We downloaded everything. Emails, transfers, approval codes, a trail of corruption that linked him to nearly $4.6 million in stolen land value. But as we were leaving, the motion sensors flickered on. A voice echoed down the hallway. "Hey, who's there?" "Security." We bolted out the side exit, papers in hand, hearts pounding. For a moment, I felt like I was living one of those crime thrillers, except this was my life, my land, my fight. The warning the next morning, I found something taped to my cabin door. A Polaroid photo of me and Lisa walking out of the records office. Underneath, written in marker, "You're making a big mistake." I froze. Someone was watching us. Lisa came by that afternoon, her jaw tight with anger. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "Don't give them what they want." But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than both of us. Karen may have been gone, but her network still had power and money. Then Lisa's phone buzzed. She glanced down and went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Reed just filed an injunction. He's claiming your deed is fraudulent and that the HOA still owns your land." I slammed my fist on the table. "He's doubling down. He's desperate. We hit a nerve." That's when I realized this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The setup 2 days later, we walked into the county courthouse again. This time the cameras weren't there. No reporters, just us, Reed and his high-priced lawyer. He smirked when he saw me. You really should have taken the buyout, he said. Would have saved you a lot of trouble. I leaned forward. You can't buy something that isn't for sale, he smiled. Everyone has a price. But I just handed Lisa the flash drive, the one with his entire transaction history. When the judge saw the evidence, his tone changed fast. Mr. Reed, he said slowly, would you care to explain why county accounts received deposits from HOA funds 3 days before each property transfer? Reed stammered. Those were administrative reimbursements, Lisa stepped in. Reimbursements totaling $4.6 million. He froze, the judge's face hardened. I'm issuing an immediate audit. Bailiff sees all county property files related to this case. Reed's smirk vanished. As we walked out of the courtroom, Lisa looked at me and whispered, we just took down the man behind the curtain. What would you do if the person trying to steal your land worked for the government itself? Would you fight back or walk away? Let me know in the comments below and hit that subscribe button, because in Part 9 I finally get justice and uncover one last secret Karen left behind. It took weeks, but the investigation spread like wildfire. Carlton Reed was arrested on charges of bribery, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the county. And when the news broke, every HOA in the district came under review. Karen's name was now a cautionary tale, a symbol of greed and power gone too far. But for me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace. The return to the cabin the morning after Reed's arrest, I drove back to the lake, that same winding dirt road where it all began. The sun was rising over the water, painting the cabin in gold. It looked smaller now, not because it had changed, but because I had. I stood there for a long time, listening to the soft sound of the waves. Lisa joined me later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. So, she said with a smirk, what's next for the man who beat the HOA and the county? I laughed. Maybe I'll finally enjoy the quiet. She raised her cup. To peace, then. We clinked mugs and sat on the porch steps, watching the world come alive again. The hidden folder a week later, I got a call from the county auditor's office. They'd been cleaning out Reed's desk and found something, a folder marked HOA Karen Files. Inside were emails between Karen and Reed. One of them caught my attention immediately. Make sure his cabin appraisal stays low, he's buying it for cents on the dollar. When the resort expansion starts, we'll claim eminent domain. He'll never see it coming. They had planned it from the start. The 25-cent sale wasn't luck, it was bait. But they underestimated one thing, me. The final twist: 3 months later, the county auctioned off all confiscated HOA property. Developers lined up, but I only wanted one thing, the land around my cabin, the same land Karen tried to steal. When the gavel hit the block, I made my bid. $1. No one else dared challenge it. The auctioneer smiled. Sold to the man who bought his cabin for $25. The room erupted in applause. The message to Karen: I never saw Karen again. She's serving 7 years for fraud and racketeering. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about that little cabin by the lake, the one she almost took. I like to think she does. And maybe somewhere in that prison cell, she finally realized you can't own what you don't respect. The closing scene: I rebuilt the cabin porch, fixed the roof, and finally opened it to visitors, veterans, families, anyone who needed a quiet escape. There's a small plaque by the door now. It reads, bought for 25 cents, worth 10 million, earned through truth. Every time I see it, I smile. Because no HOA, no corrupt official, no greedy Karen could ever take that away again. So that's how I turned a 25-cent cabin into a $10 million victory and exposed an entire network of corruption along the way. What would you have done if your government tried to steal your land? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more true justice stories like this one. Because sometimes, revenge is served legally.